Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea from Game Informer. This is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. As you are listening to this episode, I am out in sunny Los Angeles for Summer Game Fest 2024, and as such, we are pre-recording this episode a little bit early, which unfortunately means no news during the show. But since there's bound to be a ton of news hitting around the time of this episode's airing, I will have an SGF extravaganza next week to catch up on anything that we've missed, plus all my hands-on impressions for anything that applies to Nintendo. This week, however, we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of what would go on to be the best-selling game across Nintendo's last two consoles, Mario Kart 8. Joining me for that is Giant Bomb creative director Dan Ryckert. Dan, how are you doing today?
I am doing great, Brian. Happy to be on. Happy to talk Nintendo, and this game in particular. It's been pretty much a mainstay. Anytime, certainly with my dad and certain friends and casual friends and games industry friends, it's Mario Kart 8 has been a massive thing for a long time. So very excited to talk about it.
Yeah, 10 years in, it's still one of the biggest games on the planet, which is just wild to think about. But before we get in to the Mario Kart 8 discussion, Dan, we have a time-honored tradition here for anybody making their debut on All Things Nintendo. We get to know them a little bit through the lens of their history with Nintendo. So I'm going to ask you two questions here. The first one is, what was your first Nintendo game? This can be an early Nintendo memory. It can be like the first game you remember buying, first console, whatever it is. Like, what is your first Nintendo game?
I have maybe the most boring possible answer for this, and it is Super Mario Brothers. It is the most obvious one, but I think my first memory in life is being four years old and playing Super Mario Brothers, and just being absolutely enamored with it. The NES was just kind of everywhere. This would have been like 88 when I was 4 years old, and everyone's house had the NES, and most of them had the pack that came with the Mario Brothers Duck Hunt. I know there was also the one with track and field, right? But everyone I knew had the Duck Hunt one. So that was the one. That was my first game, and then from then that opened doors to Mega Mans and Punch Outs and all that stuff. But the NES and Mario specifically was the core.
I mean, my answer is I don't know which came first. It was either me playing Mario Duck Hunt or it was me playing The Legend of Zelda. So it's not like my answer is any like more obscure or cool or anything. Like neither of us are giving the hipster pick on that one.
Sure. It was Kid Icarus, yeah.
Yeah, I was a big ice climbers guy at age 4.
No.
So that goes to the next part of that question, which is, what is your favorite Nintendo game of all time?
It's a tough one because you can always say the nostalgia pick, but then there's also like, okay, I'll just say this. Here's my easy answer: Link to the Past, and that is the one that my entire life I was like, this is my favorite game of all time. This is the one that means the most to me. And then when Breath of the Wild came out, I did say that, like, you know what? I think this might be my new favorite game of all time, and it made me feel like a kid again because it brought back those feelings that I felt when I was a kid playing Link to the Past. But as I think about it, like, I do think Link to the Past has maybe come back. I haven't put together a whole list. I'm not going to say definitively this is my number one game of all time, but like the first thing that pops into my head when I hear that question is Link to the Past.
I mean, that's the way to go, right? Is if you kind of conflicted between which one is which, like, you kind of got to go with the gut instinct.
Yeah. And like, you talk about those childhood memories, and I got the Super Nintendo and Link to the Past the same Christmas. And keep in mind, that also means I got Mario World the same Christmas. So Mario World and Link to the Past, two of the only games ever that I would consider perfect video games, I got on the same day. So yeah, you want to talk about just a core memory that's doesn't get much better than that.
What a Christmas.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah. What must have been 90, 91 or 92? But because it had been out for a little bit, the Super Nintendo. And because I remember Mario World says 91 at the beginning. I think that was, was the North American?
August 23rd, 1991, I believe.
For the US?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, maybe it was, yeah. Because I remember it had been around for a while before I got it. So maybe it was just those 4 or 5 months.
Not a launch title. So,
right. I wonder when that was. Maybe it was 92.
Let's look this up. I think that was oh my God, November 1990. Oh wait, that's Japan. April 1992. So you probably got it Christmas 92.
Okay, that makes sense. So I would have been 8. Yeah. Okay.
We might have gotten our Super Nintendos on the same day. Maybe I got mine on 91 Christmas, but like I think it might have been 92. And I remember getting that. I didn't get any extra games because it came with Mario World. So my parents were like, okay, well, that's good enough. But my dad did get what was it, Battle Tank War in the Gulf, I think it was
Oh,
called.
it's very specific.
Yeah, so he got that and he was like all excited about that. And like we always had this trend of like, all right, well, I'm gonna get one of the games, and then my dad's gonna get one of the games.
Oh,
And
nice.
so like the first time it was like I got Mario World, he got Battle Tank War in the Gulf or whatever it was called. And then like a few years later, I got Donkey Kong Country and he got Madden 95.
Wow, that's totally how it worked with me too. Where it's like I would get Donkey Kong Country or Yoshi's Island or something, and my dad would get NBA Jam or Ken Griffey Jr. or a Championship Pool or Jack Nicklaus Golf, those type of things. So even though I wasn't a sports kid, I was playing all these games, and like anything I know about actual sports, I know because of RBI Baseball or Baseball Stars or NBA Jam. So
I mean,
very yeah.
I played baseball all throughout my childhood and teen years and everything. And then I sprained my ankle the week before like my first time going out for the high school team. So I missed that year of baseball. But then like tryouts for the tennis team were like 2 weeks later. And I'd never picked up a tennis racket in my life. But I knew how tennis worked because of Mario Tennis and Virtua Tennis on Dreamcast.
Oh God, two incredible games. Yes,
Yeah,
both
so
of
like I
those.
knew all the rules, I knew all the strategies. So I got on the court having never played during tryouts, and I made the team.
All the terms, deuce and
Yeah.
all that stuff, just because, yeah, absolutely.
So like
Same.
it's crazy, and like I've avoided like car accidents because like I knew how to like drive like around like slick surfaces because of like
Sure.
Mario Kart and Gran Turismo, and it's like
Yeah, you just hit B after you hit the banana peel and you're fine.
exactly
Yeah.
those banana peels just in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
So Dan, you've had quite the career trajectory here. So currently creative director at Giant Bomb, but for those unaware or kind of new to the gaming media scene, you were an editor at Game Informer. In fact, I filled the vacancy that you left back in you left in 2014, and then I
Summer,
joined in
yeah.
2015.
Yep.
So talk to me a little bit about like how you got involved with like games media.
So I started by writing reviews, just reviews for a local newspaper in college. It was the Lawrence Journal World and Lawrence.com. So I did 600 reviews over the span of 4 years. Paid my way out to E3 every year, and then that directly led to Game Informer. Because specifically, rewind a little bit, I used to work at the store level at Funkoland, and then I was there for the changeover to GameStop. And this is 2000 to 2003, 2004. And they used to have VHS tapes that Game Informer would send in, or GameStop would send in, be like, hey, pre-order Wind Waker, pre-order, trailers and pre-order stuff. And I remember thinking like, why the hell don't they promote Game Informer? They're always telling us to sell subscriptions to this. And I've been reading Game Informer since I was 9. I love the magazine. And so I called corporate when I was 18, and I was like, hey, you don't know who I am, but I'm an 18-year-old kid that works at your Kansas store. I also make short films and stuff. I do video production. I would shoot a commercial for you for free if you will send me up to Minneapolis, and so I can just kind of like hang out and interview the editors and stuff and shoot a little sketch with them and everything. And they came back to me and they're like, I expected them to be like, whatever, kid, see ya. But they came back and they're like, yeah, we're interested, but we do legally have to pay you. So how much do you want? And I was like, what? Oh, okay. So I was like, a couple grand and like, 500 for a cameraman and travel, hotel, all that stuff. And they sent me, this was back when they sent me like an envelope with printed out tickets, hotel reservations up in the warehouse district in Minneapolis.
What?
I was 18 and there was also like 300 for like props because I was going to buy a Solid Snake outfit. I was going to put together, it was going to be a Metal Gear Solid parody. It's on YouTube. If you search for Game Informer Metal Gear Solid parody, you'll see the commercial. I'm in it. I'm like a GameStop associate, and Andy McNamara is in it. Former editor Justin Leeper is Solid Snake. So yeah, on this cold call, long shot, they flew me up to Game Informer. I met Andy Mack, met Helgeson, met Reiner, Kato, all these guys I wound up working with later. Shot the commercial. Don't know if they used it. And then fast forward to me doing the reviews, going to E3 and stuff, I would find McNamara, I would find Reiner and these guys on the show floor. And I'd be like, hey, remember me? I'm that kid that came up and I shot that commercial. I'm writing reviews now. I want to work for you. And Andy was like, we're not really hiring. Hopefully something soon. Hopefully, whatever. And so 4 years of bugging McNamara. And finally, in like 2009, he reached out and he's like, hey, we're actually going to make a push for online. We're hiring like 5 people. Would love to talk to you. And that's when I got hired, moved up to Minneapolis. And there we go.
It's wild how, I mean, I didn't fly up to Minneapolis and shoot a documentary in the outfit of Solid Snake, but I mean, it was kind of like, I'd been writing freelance for a while and I was bugging Reiner just relentlessly because I was, writing reviews and stuff, running a small independent site. And I was bugging Reiner relentlessly because I was starting to do like more freelance stuff. And Reiner kept being like, oh, well, we don't do freelance. Sorry. Disclosure, we do now. So if you're a freelance writer listening to this and you want to pitch something, hit me up. But at the time, I was just like constantly in Reiner's DMs, like telling him like, hey, I have this idea. And he's just like, we still can't do freelance. And then I wrote a freelance piece for Kotaku, and Tina Amini, who used to be the deputy editor there, and then she went on to be like the IGN editor in chief, and now she works at Xbox. I think she puts together like the Xbox showcases now. I think
Yeah,
she's,
and
like,
she
in
did the
charge
sit
of that.
down with Phil Spencer after the whole like Sony news came out and everything. Like she's she's doing great there.
So yeah, she's doing amazing work. One of my favorite people in the industry. And I was talking to her, and like, she just we were getting out of like the EA press conference at E3 2014, and she was just in like the circle, and I was talking to her because I'd worked with her as my editor. And then Andy McNamara walks over, and he's like, it's like, oh, this guy has no idea who I am. And he looks over at me and he's like, hey, I really loved your piece on Kotaku. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then like, I think shortly before that or shortly after that, you had announced that you were leaving. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to watch this like a hawk and like try to like get in on this. And sure enough, it ended up working out. I mean, I don't know like how much like meeting him in person at that E3 really contributed, because I still had to go through like all the interview process and everything. And it was still like a long process. But like, yeah, it was very similar in that way, where it's like I just like basically ran into him at E3 and like put a name to the face, basically.
I mean, it doesn't hurt. And, you hear about plenty of people that like, you meet someone at an industry event or something and you get some FaceTime with them, and that is only going to help your chances. They can attach a name to a face and it's not just an application or a resume or something like that. I do remember it was cool when you were hired as my replacement, because I had knew you beforehand. We had hung out at PAXs and things like that. And, we were going out to all those events and having drinks together, for several years before you got hired. So, when you got hired, I was like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I know Brian. Awesome.
I remember Matt Burt's former managing editor. He was the one who hired me. He was like, yeah, but like, don't tell anybody, like kind of like keep it on the down low. And like, you had texted me like, I guess like a month before I was about to start, and you're like, hey, congrats on the Game Informer gig. And I'm like, how did you find out? And you're like, I know some people there. And I'm like, well, obviously, I just wanted to make sure like somebody didn't like tell you. And I'm like, I've literally told like 3 people in my life that I got this job.
I don't remember how I found out, but it must have just heard through the grapevine somehow.
I remember the first indication that like I had gotten it. I'd gone through 3. This was, by the way, this was the 4th time I had applied to Game Informer. I had gotten rejected the first 3 times. And I remember the first indication that I had was that the 3 interns at the time that had been at Game Informer, I suddenly got LinkedIn notifications that they were looking at my profile, and I'm like, I wonder what that's about.
Interesting. Was that like the Mahardy class of interns, or
I think it might have been. I think that it might have been Mike Mahardy. Yeah,
that checks out. Yeah,
but it was just funny. I was like, yeah, I don't know if they know that it like tells the person that you're looking at their LinkedIn profile.
Yep, definitely does.
So you left for Giant Bomb, and how long were you there for in that first stint?
First stint was summer of 2014 up until January 2020. So until right before the pandemic.
Why did I think it was shorter than that?
Well, it was kind of like broken up, and like I had a few years in San Francisco with the West Coast crew, then I had a few years on the East Coast. So it does feel like I had a couple little, few year stints, but altogether it was closer to 6.
Yeah, I guess so. And I did come out and visit you guys. I remember that was like one of the first trips I did at GI was I came out to San Francisco, and it was like, I guess it was short. No, this was like 2016 probably. And I remember it was shortly after Tim Turry had left Game Informer and he moved out there. And, Brian Vore was already out there with you. And we all went out and got like root beer floats.
Oh, yeah. Out in the sunset, the Not Your Father's root beer floats.
Yeah,
those are good. Yeah,
those were delicious. And I remember I held mine. I dropped it onto the table, and it was like the graded tables, like the patio tables.
Yeah.
And all the root beer like fizzed up and then went all over my lap through the table. And I was like, that's like a 50-minute Uber back to my hotel.
Oh, Jesus.
I just had drenched pants on the front, like with root beer everywhere. So
jeez.
Great times. But shortly after that, you left and you were with WWE, which what a perfect fit. Like I remember when Brian Vore told us that he was leaving Game Informer and he was going to work on like the WWE 2K series. I was like, oh, well, that's a perfect fit. And then you did this, going to actually work for WWE proper. Like, I mean, how did that even come about?
I had just done I knew Xavier Woods, WWE superstar, part of the New Day. I've known him since like 2011. Another one of those, just running into someone. Like I saw him at an event outside SummerSlam 2011. I went up to him. I was like, "Hey, I heard you're into video games." And he's like, "Yeah." And I said, "I work for Game Informer." And he like stopped in his tracks, like, "Holy shit. You got to come out with me tonight." And it was the wrestler Paige, now Soraya is her name now. It was her 21st birthday. And so a bunch of the wrestlers were going bar hopping. So it was like, so this is the first time I've like gotten to know like a WWE person. It was Woods, it was Corey Graves, now an announcer, just a bunch of the superstars. We just hung out and talked games all night. And I stayed friends with Woods forever after that. And then he started his YouTube channel, Up, Down, Down. Mm-hmm. I made some appearances on there. I did one with like at Greg Miller's place with Greg and Xavier. So basically just knew Woods and worked with him several times as just appearances. And through that, his production people got to know me a bit. And they got to know kind of the Giant Bomb stuff. And then suddenly I'm bringing in Xavier Woods and Samoa Joe and these superstars onto Giant Bomb content. So WWE knows who I am at that point. And then they decided, I guess there was a point in time they thought they would get into the podcast game, which makes a lot of sense, but they never actually really committed to it. But they committed enough to hire me for a few years and not let me do anything. But that's how I got there. So they stole me from Giant Bomb East. I move up to Connecticut. 2 months after I moved there, pandemic hits. Suddenly I'm producing podcasts with wrestlers from a closet in Stamford, Connecticut. I'm teaching The Undertaker how to use Zoom. It's just, this is a weird job. So like, yeah, I had 2 months of being backstage, traveling around, producing shows with John Cena and all these guys. And then pandemic hits, just straight through it. It's all Zoom, never went back. And then they stopped doing podcasts altogether after I left. So
I've known so many people in that kind of that precarious position of like, I got this amazing job, dream job, like February 2020.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, everything changed like a month later. And like, am I even going to have this job for like any longer?
It's time to learn some new skills. I'd never done remote podcasts, which honestly, it did kind of work out because all the stuff I learned during that time, like at Giant Bomb, I was, or even Game Informer, I was typically the guy that I would sit down, I would talk over I'd do the episodes of replay, I would do the podcast, but I was never, I always had a Hanson or a Vinny or a Drew Scanlon or someone, producing it. And then all of a sudden I'm stuck in an apartment and not leaving. And well, crap, I guess I'm going to learn how to produce podcasts remotely, going to learn how the Zoom thing works, Zencastr, all these different things. And then I started streaming on my own. And I didn't even know how to do that before. I didn't know how to stream to Twitch. And I was like, let's do it. I mean, I'm just home every night. And through doing that and having Twitch as like my creative outlet, because WWE certainly wasn't that, I learned so much about home production and things like that. And that directly led to me coming back to Giant Bomb. So as weird of a time it was with the pandemic and everything, it was actually probably the period of like the most, knowledge growth and everything I could have career-wise.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that phase right now where it's like you said, I've always had like a Ben Hansen or a Leo Vader or now Alex Van Aken. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, okay, well, I'm doing this podcast independently. And it's like, man, I'm trying to do more video and everything with it. And it is a learning experience. I will say I despise Adobe Premiere, DaVinci Resolve all the way.
Really?
That is, I mean, it's not quite as functional and like intricate as Adobe Premiere. But Adobe Premiere was like giving me like a 60% fail rate when I tried to export videos.
Oh, wow.
DaVinci Resolve has not failed me yet. Now watch, this one won't work. And if you're listening to this and not being able to find like the video version on YouTube, you know that DaVinci Resolve was listening and is like, I'll show him. But yeah, I mean, it's been like a huge learning process for me taking this podcast independent, not having like, somebody to kind of lean on to do some of the video stuff. So
that's how you learn though.
I definitely sympathize with that that journey that you've had, but it's kind of been like a new era for Giant Bomb, right? Like,
yes.
We saw Jeff leave probably right before you came back.
Yep.
Okay, and then you've kind of slotted into like that leadership role, and it's been like a great staff that you've put together. Like Jeff Grubb is incredible, and you've had like an amazing cast of folks come over and like work on Giant Bomb.
Yeah, it's, we are a small staff, and we're all remote. So it really does feel like a third, if I had the West Coast, East Coast, and now this new era of remote, it does feel like a third, stint here with a whole different crew to work with. But despite being a small staff, we are well-rounded, and, Grubb is a absolute workhorse in terms of the news, and Jan is just a production maestro. And then, we work with so many freelancers and people working on our social that have all been a delight to work with. We get to work with like Tam and Lucy over on the GameSpot side and everything. So it's it's been really, really interesting, and it's a really great crew to work with. Specifically, like, we're doing this Blight Club show where we play through the worst games of all time, and that's me, Grubb, and Mike Minotti from GamesBeat, and it's honestly, it's like a Mount Rushmore show for me. It's up there with Replay and Mario Party and Metal Gear Scanlan and like Blight Club. It's some of the most fun I've ever had in 20 years of doing this. It's awesome.
I have adored seeing the clips from that show hit on social, because like some of them are like the Superman 64 stuff. By the way, shout out Zach Pliggy, who is the biggest Superman 64 fan of all time.
Jesus. They exist.
He does have a very sweet story about why. But watching some of your frustration from that game, I've howled with laughter watching some of the social clips you've put out from that.
Superman 64 is like, it has earned its reputation for a reason. It is, and if you haven't seen it, we are working on doing like kind of a supercut highlight reel of that whole game in my time with it. So that should be up in the near future. But it's unbelievable how broken and bad it is. I think everyone just thinks it's like, oh, it's the game where it sucks and you fly through rings. No, there is the flying through rings is the nice part of the game. That is like the part where it's like, oh, good, it's just a ring level. It's not the on foot puzzle stuff. It is unbelievably bad.
Yeah, and I've never made it past the ring level, as most people didn't, because that part is so broken and difficult. And to see you tackle some of like the later stuff that I've watched like YouTube like video essays on that game and like rage videos about it, but like some of the stuff I just didn't know existed, and like seeing you tackle it and like your reaction to it is top tier content.
Well, and that's the thing is like, we've looked at these and we all know these games are bad. Like on Replay, a Game Informer, like we'd look at Bubsy 3D and I'd make Tim Turry play it for 30 minutes and this game sucks. And then you move on to the next game next week. The deal with Blight Club is, no, we're beating these games, the whole thing. And like, no one was really like, I'm sure there are long plays of everything, but like most people play like a half hour and they're like, holy crap, this sucks. No, we're going to go all the way in and see how bad it sucks. And it's usually worse than you think it is.
Basically what, Replay turned into a little bit with Super Replay. Mm-hmm. And like, having like the Sonic 06 Super Replay is like one of our most popular ones, and Overblood, obviously.
Yeah, that started because I started Replay with Tim and Reiner back in the day, and I had the idea of like, because I wanted to do Link to the Past specifically. It's my favorite game. I wanted to do a replay of it, but then I was thinking like, man, I feel like a half hour or whatever isn't going to do Link to the Past justice. So I remember going into Reiner's office and being like, okay, I got an idea. We call it Super Replay, and we play the whole game. And it's for games. I remember saying specifically, it's for games that are too good to just be contained in one episode. And that's the intention. The first one ever was Link to the Past. The second one I picked Mario 3. And then I think pretty quick, I think the next one might have been Overblood, where it's like, I picked that out as a replay roulette. And I was like, I wonder what this thing is. And it was so funny. It's like, well, okay, maybe Super Replay doesn't just have to be good games, because maybe there's some gold in this,
Yeah, and I mean, those end up being the most popular ones because like people get really invested in like not just the game and like seeing what awfulness can be around the corner, but like invested in the journey that you go on, like the cast of the series, and like being like, oh my god, I know they're gonna hate this next part because they hate like Valve puzzles or whatever, this is gonna really like really tick off Joe Juba, this next part. And
sure,
it's like,
sure.
And like that was the part that I think really clicked. So it's a brilliant idea to kind of like take that and like be like, oh, well, maybe this is just for good games. Oh no, maybe it's not. Maybe like the better part's actually playing the bad games.
Well, I mean, that DNA is in Blight Club because the first one was Sonic 06. Because I had left by the time you guys did Sonic 06 for Super Replay, and I'd always heard how bad it was. And I remember I came back to Giant Bomb and I was like, maybe I should just stream Sonic 06 and see how bad it is. I know it's supposed to be terrible. And it was like a few episodes into that it's like, okay, let's actually just make this a thing. And we branded the Blight Club, and that was kind of the beginning of that.
And Sonic 06 is such a long game. Like it's like 27 hours or something to get through all
like four campaigns.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Have you heard about Project 06 or Sonic P06, where it's a fan mod where they're actually remaking the game with like physics like everything. And apparently it's like people who have played, I think like Sonic and Shadow's campaign is complete right now. Like you can play the full like campaigns of them. It's just like certain cutscenes aren't fully done yet or something. But like apparently it's one of the better 3D Sonic games now, which is absurd to think about. I want to check it out at some point. Like I'm probably gonna wait for it to be done, but like they fixed all the bugs. They've like fixed the physics and everything. And like, yeah, I've heard amazing things about it from like high level Sonic influencers on YouTube.
Boy, people can do all sorts of things with their time, can't they?
I guess so. But like, hey, I mean, I would love to play like a good version of that game.
Be curious. I mean, I'm kind of doing that now with have you heard of that Ship of Harkinian stuff?
No.
Oh, that's a huge project with Ocarina of Time. And I checked it out. So Ocarina of Time with like 165 refresh rate, widescreen support, tons of like unbelievable amounts of customization.
I have heard about this. I just didn't recognize the name.
It is incredible. And then I screwed it up even more intentionally by doing Ship of Harkinian plus randomizer. So I'd never done an Ocarina randomizer. So I added that plus crowd control. So the Twitch audience can like trigger things like dropping enemies in, dropping bombs randomly, warping me, killing me, things like that. So I did like a 4-hour stream the other night of that, and it was a blast. And I want to keep moving with that file. That Ship of Harkinian thing is incredible if you haven't seen it.
I do need to check that out. So transitioning over, I did do some Q&A last episode, kick off the show. But this will already be a pretty jam-packed show. So if you have any questions or comments stemming from all the SGF announcements and games and everything, you can get in touch with me through the free All Things Nintendo Patreon page or by emailing me, brian@allthingsnintendo.com, trying to make the show more interactive since going independent. So please take advantage of that if you are so inclined. Dan, we're at an interesting place with this episode because, as you pointed out when I asked you to be on this show, you reviewed Mario Kart 8 for Game Informer. In fact, it was the final review at Game Informer.
It was. This would have been like, what? Was this like April 2014 or something like that?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that would have been my last one, which I thought that was a pretty fitting one because I've always loved this series. And so, that's a good final one.
And the interesting thing is that I have also reviewed Mario Kart 8 for Game Informer, but it was Deluxe? Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for Switch.
Okay, what did you give Deluxe?
9.25, the same that you gave.
Okay.
Mario Kart 8 for Wii U. And I did, however, review the original Wii U release that we are focusing on primarily for one of the websites I kind of helped run. I co-founded this website back in 2010, and it was one of my, I don't want to say one, like my final review. Definitely wasn't, because I was with that website through like December of 2014. But I do remember that it was like I worked so hard to get my foot in the door with Nintendo. Like they were notoriously difficult to like get like a media contact with, especially back in the day. And like they were like one of the last eggs that I could really like crack in like getting my foot in the door. And I finally did, and they were giving me like advanced copies and everything of like so I could review the games. And then I was like, okay, well here, like I sent my Mario Kart 8 review, and then like I went to work because it was like a side thing. I had a day job and everything that I had. And then I remember I got a text from my Nintendo person. This was like 2 days before embargo lift, and they're like, why is your Mario Kart 8 review online? And I was like, what? And it turned out that the guy that I sent it to edit thought that I'd just go up online whenever, and he hit publish. And I was just like,
with Nintendo? Oh no.
I had like a mini panic attack of like, oh my God, it's over. I worked all these years to get like my foot in the door with Nintendo, and they're never going to trust me again. And thankfully nobody noticed aside from the one PR person. And, I got lucky because they still like me. They understood it's an honest mistake. It wasn't me trying to like get ahead of it. But yeah, that was one of the scariest moments of like my pre-Game Informer career.
I got that call once pre-Game Informer, and it was I pride myself on like I've never broken embargo or anything like that, and I guess I technically did once, but it wasn't my fault. They didn't send along the embargo information, so this would have been 2006. I was writing for that paper, and same as you. I was getting stuff early, so it was like I got the Wii and all the launch games like 3 weeks before it came out.
Wow!
And it was just awesome playing. Wii bowling with friends and something like this is going to be the biggest thing. This is great. And Twilight Princess was one of them, and I was playing through it. And I remember like getting to the part where there's Ganondorf, and he had not been part of any of the marketing or trailers or anything like that. So I just did the thing where my crappy old flip phone, I took some pictures with like my Motorola Razr of the screen. I didn't have any capture gear or anything. And I just put up a little thing on Lawrence.com, this Kansas website. And I was like, wow, first images of Ganon or Ganondorf in Twilight Princess. And then, keep in mind, this was weeks before the Wii came out. It got linked, like I think IGN, maybe Kotaku, a bunch of the big sites like linked to it and everything. It crashed our website. And then like that night I put the photos up. I went to the bar, And then I wake up the next morning, like hung over to a phone call from my Nintendo rep being like, hey, Dan, seems like you're enjoying Twilight Princess. Seems like you're moving through it pretty quick. How about those pictures, huh? And I was like, oh, yeah. And they're like, Dad, did we send along the embargo stuff? And I checked my email. I was like, nope. It's like, oh yeah, that's on us. We should have let you know. Don't. Can you take that down? And like by that point, it was already everywhere or whatever. But yes, I definitely had that feeling of like, I'm in trouble from Nintendo. Here we go.
Yeah, thankfully, I think we both probably have pretty good relationships with Nintendo now.
Oh, I'm in Nintendo jail now.
Oh, no.
All of Giant Bomb has been since 2016, 2017, due to someone that's hasn't been on the site for a long time. And we have been blacklisted for many years now. We do not get advanced copies. We get codes day of. We occasionally get invited to events and things like that. But yes, a thing from many years ago involving someone who is not a part of the site anymore. That was out of our control. We are still deep in Nintendo jail. But, they got, I still talk to the people and, they're... Yeah.
Well,
sorry, not like knives out if they see me at SGF or anything, It's not like that. So,
well, apologies for bringing up the sore spot there. I still have a good relationship with Nintendo.
Sounds great.
It's wonderful.
Playing games before they come out, yeah, that's awesome. It was great before Tears of the Kingdom, when I'm hearing from everyone like, "Oh man," it's like, quit telling me about it.
All right, Dan, let's talk about the history of Mario Kart 8. Let's move on from this before make both of us sweat too much.
Sure.
So normally I pull all these like history discussions from Iwata Asks interviews, and Iwata was still doing the interviews back when Mario Kart 8 came out, but unfortunately he never did a Mario Kart 8 interview. Which seems weird because he did Mario Kart Wii. I wonder if he just thought like, okay, we covered enough Mario Kart stuff in Mario Kart Wii. But like, I think the last Iwata Asks, at least from the Wii U perspective, was Splatoon. When I was looking at it, I think that was like the latest one, which came out after Mario Kart 8. So I don't know, like why they decided to skip it. Maybe they were just like, oh, Mario Kart's going to do good no matter what. But
did he normally have it with like every game that came out, or every
not
first
every
party
game, but like most of like the big ones, they would do like tentpole like game interviews. Like there's just a wealth of information if you've never checked out the Iwata Asks. I know you have, but like they would do a lot of really good ones. Like I did a Super Smash Brothers retrospective with Suriel a couple weeks ago, and he did one with Sakurai to talk about Mario or Smash Brothers Wii or Brawl. And there's a lot of like great retrospective stuff there because Iwata was also heavily involved with Smash Brothers. He was working at HAL at the time. When Smash 64 came out. But yeah, it was odd that there was no Iwata Asks. So actually I did find a really good interview on MTV.com that I actually pulled. They don't do a whole lot of games coverage these days, but
I think Patrick Klepek was there for a while. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That was
and Totillo, I think, was there. Yeah. Back in the day.
I don't know who the person was that wrote the interview, but let's start at the start here. We first heard of Mario Kart 8 during a January 2013 Nintendo Direct before it was given its first real trailer at E3 of that year. And I watched the trailer, and it at first seems like it's just like a better, like more technically proficient version of Mario Kart 7, which had come out on 3DS in 2011. But at the 43-second mark, there's this really cool camera trick that pulls back and shows the drivers going up like an anti-grav and like showing off the anti-gravity gimmick. You were at Game Informer at the time, and I'm assuming that you were kind of in that cramped E3 booth that we used to get, like kind of in like the business
war
section.
Room.
Yeah, the war room.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember watching the Nintendo Direct and seeing that trailer?
I mean, I definitely would have been there and watching it and probably very excited about it. But like, I'm trying to picture it now, and I'm picturing the one. Is it like one of the Mario circuits or something where there's the big kind of horseshoe one that goes up? Yeah, okay. Then I think I do vaguely remember that. Because up to that point, I think it was showing like the gliders and the underwater and stuff like that, which like, okay, cool. But that was that introduced on the 3DS one on 7?
Yeah, Mario Kart 7.
Okay, so it's like, okay, great. This looks really sharp. And the benefit of like, wait, yeah, it was Wii U. So the Wii U was the first HD one. I remember my takeaway being like, man, Mario visuals look incredible in HD. Like, I'm glad we were finally at the point where Nintendo is making HD consoles because it just looked so great graphically. But yeah, it did seem like the gimmick was going to be like, oh crap, okay, we can go like upside down. And it made me think of the American Gladiators. What was the Sky Track one where it's like you're upside down and you had to like scramble across this track upside down, and then a gladiator would come after you,
God, yeah. God,
Made me think of that. It was like an upside down like version of the wall, that event they did. I love American Gladiator. So yeah, and I remember wondering like, oh, I wonder how that's gonna play out in game, and they did utilize that quite a bit on a lot of those tracks.
Oh yeah. And it's funny, I actually found the Game Informer write-up from when Jeff Cork, back when he got his hands on at E3 that year, and he mentioned like the Mobius strip that the 8 in the Mario Kart 8 logo represents. Right. And then he focused very heavily on magnets for some reason, which he mentioned like how the wheels, they turn sideways when you go into the anti-grav thing. And I guess I never considered them to be magnets. I just thought it was some sort of like anti-gravity tech, but like it's literally in the headline about magnets. And I'm like, I don't know. I never like, did you ever think of them as like magnets, or did you just think they were like some kind of like anti-grav tech?
Yeah, I think I'm more along the lines of that. Cause like, I feel like, like Ratchet and Clank and stuff would make a big deal out of like, these are the magnet boots, and you're like clank, clank. They are like making connection. This, it just seemed like you were kind of gliding, and there was some sort of weird tech that just kind of kept you adhered to the track. Yeah. I never thought of magnets specifically.
But yeah,
Cork never shuts up about magnets, though.
He does.
That's his main thing. Yeah.
No matter what game you're talking about, he just always find some way to wiggle magnets into it. Yeah. So the original gimmick that Nintendo had planned, do you know about this?
I don't think so.
So the original gimmick they had planned was to add a drill that allowed racers to dig under the ground. And then in that MTV interview, it was producer Hideki Kono, who, by the way, was the director of Super Mario Kart and Mario Kart 64 before transitioning to being like the producer of the series. He's kind of like the Takashi Tezuka or the Eiji Aonuma of Mario Kart at this point. He said the following, quote, "In 7, we had the glider and submersion in water, so we were also thinking about new ideas for 8. We thought, well, since we did all that, why not put a drill on the cart and have them go through the earth somehow, subterranean racing? But we kind of thought that's not such an interesting idea. And after that, we hit upon the anti-gravity mechanic."
Yeah, I'm trying to picture that. Like, if you could kind of Monty Mole down, like, I mean, that's maybe a way that, like, if a red shell or a blue shell or something was coming after you, you could maybe like dodge that. I could see that being interesting as maybe like an item. And maybe it's like an item, and you pop it and you go underground, and then maybe if like you go underneath another guy and like pop up, or like the wake of your thing could screw him up. But like, I can't imagine that being like a whole gimmick the way the glider and the magnets. Now I'm saying magnets, crap. Like, I could see it as an item and not much more than that,
The only way that I think that it could work is if every level or every course was designed multi-tiered. Like you're driving and you drill down whenever you want, and there's like an underground version of the track as well. But that would be really like an intensive like game design mechanic then, because then you have to like basically double your work in like creating these tracks.
But then what if you also have ascend to get up? You can drill down and then ascend up in a Mario Kart.
Yeah, there we go. We have the entire Tears of the Kingdom suite, and then you can form together like 2 items, and
And there's caverns, and
Director Kosuke Yabuki was also in the interview, and he said that the more powerful hardware of the Wii U was the primary reason that they went with the anti-gravity mechanics, and it was something that the 3DS would not have been able to handle. And one interesting tidbit from this interview was Kono actually talking about the origin of the blue shell power-up. The most maddening of all the power-ups, and probably the most iconic at this point. I mean, is there a more iconic thing? I mean, it was even in the Mario movie.
That's the thing that just like, even if you're the most casual of casual gamers, you remember the blue shell and how much it made you mad as a kid. I would say it's probably the number one.
Yeah, so he said, one of the things that we always think about when making a Mario Kart game is the replay value for the customer. When we made that game, we thought it added something to that value for people to play over and over when you think you want to play one more game. So the original idea that we had back in Mario Kart 64, where we hit upon the idea for a blue shell weapon, was that it would enable whoever was in the back of the pack to still want to continue to race, to still want to keep going, something that would have allowed them to still have that feeling. And then they were talking about how, like, the original iteration of it was like, it went straight up the middle and hit anybody that like was in the way of it, and then they decided to like make it so that it would like fly over and hit, and then like it must have been Totillo, because it was a very Totillo back and forth that he had with Kono, where he was like, yeah, sometimes I'll be in second place and like I'll still get hit by the blue shell, and Kono just like laughed and was like, well, I guess you're just too close to the leader.
Well, they must have been thinking of that from the very beginning because, the first one on Super Nintendo has a ton of rubber banding, but also the lightning is, that only kind of pops up if you're near the back of the pack, and you really can make up a lot of ground with the lightning.
Star
So,
too.
yeah. So, I mean, all of that was in place from the very first game, but I think the blue shell is probably the best solution they had for that, But then you also have the cool ones too, like the bullet and stuff like that, where it's like, oh man, I'm just flying, things that aren't just screwing up the people in front of you, but also propelling you to the front of the pack. They've really hit a sweet spot as the games have gone on.
They have. It's been awesome. We've already done top items, but they as definitive ranking on the show, but man, they've really done an amazing job balancing it all. And I know that people will still be like, oh, there's so much rubber banding involved, so it doesn't matter how good you do in the first 2 laps. It's just all going to come down to the final lap. But it's so much fun in that way, and there's a reason that it has resonated with so many people.
And there's a reason that it's 10 plus years since release, and it's still incredibly relevant and sells so much still. Look, they're doing it right.
So if you recall, none of the Mario Kart games prior to 7 were actually numbered in sequential order. They all had names like Double Dash or Super Circuit, or they just did Mario Kart DS, Mario Kart Wii. It was never all right, this is Mario Kart 5.
Yeah, it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, so they asked Kono about that, and he said, this is a little bit more abstract, but when we had Mario Kart 7, we had the idea of calling it 7 because it was something actually unique to the series. We hadn't used numbers before in any of the previous games, although the N64 technically had numbers. Mr. Iwata also liked the idea of 7 being in the title. Then we started working on the project and had the idea for this to be Mario Kart 8. And there were supposed to be people, there were some people who were opposed. They were like, Mr. Kono, didn't you just promise that we would only use the number 7 and then that would be it for the numbering thing? So what we did is to grab those people, the staff members that were opposed to the numbered game, showed them the idea for the course, then the Mobius strip, and how we twisted it into the number 8, and everyone was satisfied. Oh, now we get it, they said.
It's clever. Yeah, but you're right. Before that, it was almost like Fast and Furious naming conventions where it's like, this one's just called Fast and Furious, and the next one will be Fast 5, and then Furious 7 or whatever. It's just whatever they want to do in that entry. Sure, go for it.
Number 10 in that should have been Fast 10 your seatbelts, right?
Oh, that's pretty good. That
good.
Yeah.
A good one.
Yeah.
What was it? Well, did they just call it Furious?
Fast X, I think. Fast X Part 1 or something.
Oh, God. I fell off after 8, I think.
Yeah, 7 was all right. And then they got a little too... I mean, I still watch them and enjoy them, but they're pretty goofy now.
They're just superhero movies at this point. I mean, when we were in school, those movies were coming out, it was okay, this is a fun, dumb, turn your brain off street racing thing. And it's now literally if a dinosaur showed up in the next one, it would not be out of place.
I mean, I watched one where John Cena was watching a nuclear weapon launch, and it's this is not what the series started. I mean, I'm not necessarily complaining. That's hilarious, but it's more Metal Gear than street racing at this point.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So getting back to Mario Kart 8, most of the courses had the anti-gravity in mind, even adding anti-gravity to some of the retro courses that were included in the game, which, by the way, always one of my favorite staples that has been implemented into there. And actually, it was May that Mario Kart 8 came out. It arrived on Wii U on May 30th, 2014. So even later into your time at Game Informer.
Oh, wow, yeah. That's a week before I left, yeah.
And it hit Metacritic with an 88, which included a 9.25 from Dan Ryckert at Game Informer. And the site that I was running at the time, I mentioned I had reviewed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. And I think most people considered it to be one of, if not the best Mario Kart games of all time. Really well-designed courses, big roster of races, perfect gameplay mechanics, pretty solid online play, aside from the weird communication policies that Nintendo has always had, where it's okay, you can talk to people through the Wii U microphone, but once the race starts, everybody's just cut off and you can't talk at all.
I don't think I've ever had any kind of voice chat in a Mario Kart 8 session.
Yeah. Very weird. But do you remember the one part that sucked about Mario Kart 8?
At launch?
Yes.
Let me get, has it been fixed since then?
It was fixed in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe.
I don't know. What was it?
Battle mode.
Oh, I forgot that was even in there.
It was awful because in the Wii U version of Mario Kart 8, the original version, all they did was they reused racetracks, which made for just an awful experience.
Right. It wasn't the dedicated arenas, right?
Yeah, they didn't have like the real like battle mode arenas that everybody is so used to. It was just like, oh, what if you could drive forward and backwards on a racetrack and then shoot at people who are going opposite directions?
Oh, I forgot about that. Oh man.
It was the reason that that game did not get a higher score from me, at least. I was like, this is fun. Like it's a really great Mario Kart game. But battle mode is like, it's been one of my favorite modes in Mario Kart since the SNES version. That's what like my dad and I played just constantly. Like, we would do Grand Prix and everything, but like when we just wanted to like get in, get out, we would just play like 3 rounds of battle mode, and that was like the best time. And to completely strip it of like what made that mode so good, it hurt. Like it really made that bad.
Especially when it had been so fun before, and some of them had even like iterated on it where was it the GameCube one that had like a shine race mode and had like a bomb mode, and they kind of did little tweaks on it. I was like, oh yeah, I would have liked to see them go further in that direction, and it seems like they just kind of really reverted and like, now you're shooting each other on the course.
I wonder if it was just one of those things where like they were adding so much content to it that they like kind of ran out of time. They're like, well, we got to get this game out the door. Let's just reuse the courses that we already have in the game. I don't know.
Yeah, I totally forgot that was even there. Now, when you say they fixed it for Switch, did they just take it out?
They no, they completely revamped it. They added arenas. Okay. They've added all those modes back into it, like the shines and the bombs and everything. All these modes. Like there's one that's like you're like it's like you're a police and you're driving around arresting other racers and putting them in jail.
It was like a Piranha Plant thing, right? You know what? I think I probably checked that out at Giant Bomb when they first launched Deluxe and have not thought about those modes since. Are those online?
They are.
Wow. I'm kind of curious to look at that. It's been forever since I've thought of that.
It's great. So even with that, the original Mario Kart 8 still went on to win several awards, including Best Family Game and Best Sports/Racing Game at the Game Awards 2014. And there was a lot of promotional crossover. So I don't know if you remember this, but there was a promotion on the Wii U. And this is, I think that Nintendo had realized by this point that the Wii U was not going to be like the successor to the Wii that they hoped it would be in terms of sales, at least.
Weird.
If you bought Mario Kart 8, I think in the first 2 months of it being out, you could get a voucher for another Wii U game for free. It was like a selection of like older Wii U games, but still, like it was like you could get New Super Mario Brothers U for free if you wanted to like buy the Mario Kart 8 in the first 2 months of it being out. Nintendo also had a partnership with Mercedes-Benz, which included kart customization parts that were just Mercedes-Benz branded. They also had a Japanese commercial for Mercedes featuring Mario Kart characters. And then McDonald's also had Mario Kart 8 Happy Meal toys. Later that year, Nintendo released a patch that allowed for amiibo functionality. You could scan your amiibos and you would get new costumes for your Mii Racer.
Right.
And then Nintendo also released DLC packs with the main attractions being crossover content for the first time in series history, with Zelda, Animal Crossing, F-Zero, and Excitebike content. So there was, you could be at Link, you could be Isabelle from Animal Crossing as playable characters, and there were also levels for those 4 franchises.
Those were awesome too, because they really went above and beyond. Like on top of it being so cool, like, I'm racing through an Animal Crossing village and all the seasons and Hyrule Castle, like them changing the coins to rupees and things like that. Like those little like Nintendo touches, they really nailed it with those. And I think now that they've opened that door, that is obviously a question people are going to have about when we eventually get a new Mario Kart is like, are we going full Smash Brothers with this? Are we going full like,
You almost have to, right? Like,
I think so.
We're going to talk a little bit about like what the future might hold for this franchise after like near the end of this main segment, but like that's the direction they've been going for ever since the DLC hit, right?
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Also in the post-launch content realm for Mario Kart 8 on Wii U, at least, we also got, in my experience, the completely untenable 200cc.
I do not do that. Some people
Have you
swear by
with it though?
I mess around with it and I don't enjoy it. And like I'll occasionally like stream it. Like we actually did a stream at Giant Bomb a few months ago where I called it the Mario Kart Grand Prix, where we played every single Grand Prix and kept a like running score tally of all of them. So we did 96 courses. It took like almost 6 hours, I think. And I remember when we were selecting it, I saw people in the chat being like, dude, cowards, dude, 200cc. I was like, we are not doing that for 6 hours. That is insanity. Maybe it'd be a little shorter if we did 200cc, but no, thank you.
No, because you'd just be running into the walls, especially if you're, yes. Are you doing split screen or are you doing online?
We were doing online.
Okay, so that's a little bit easier because like we tried doing, I think back then it was called Test Chamber, which is now like New Gameplay Today. we did a test chamber of us doing 4-player split screen on 200cc. And I remember it was just like, I'm just like speeding into corners, like just like nailing into the walls. And it's just like, there's no way I could ever do this. And I think the smaller screen definitely attributes like some of that to blame, but like, I mean, it just was impossible to stay in control of your character.
It feels like 150 is so perfectly tuned for like all of the power slides and things like that. And the moment you bump it up past that, it's like, well, you just have to rethink all of your timing and whether you do or don't power slide, like to a not fun degree.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mario Kart 8 went on to be the best-selling Wii U game of all time, selling about 8.5 million copies, which was nearly 300 million more than the second and third place, which were Super Mario 3D World. God, I can't talk. Super Mario 3D World and New Super Mario Brothers U. And then, but so it was like first place with a bullet. And then October 2016, Nintendo teased a new Mario Kart game when it first announced the Switch. But then in January 2017, just 2 months before the Switch launched, we got a first trailer for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. That trailer heavily features battle mode, which has been completely revamped to resemble what we had seen in the series before. And then it showed off some new content like a Splatoon battle mode, as well as Inklings as playable characters. Before we move on from that, though, do you remember the weirdest Zelda crossover that we got on the Wii U in terms of like post-launch content? Like not even talking like Mario Kart. This is a different game.
A non-Zelda game that brought in Zelda stuff? Are you thinking about like Hyrule Warriors?
Sonic Lost World.
Oh,
do you remember
wow.
the Zelda DLC that we got for that? Because it was a Wii U exclusive.
Nope.
You could control Sonic running around Hyrule, and you could like find the Triforce, and you could like
what Hyrule?
I think it was
like
like
a
the
new
Skyward
map
Sword.
just for that?
It was like inspired by Skyward Sword, but like it was like a new map developed for that, and like you could put Sonic in like Link's tunic.
Oh, somebody should be arrested.
It was the weirdest thing, and like because it was like part of that deal that like Nintendo had with like Sonic Team to like put out like 3, I think, exclusive Nintendo games. I think it was like Sonic Colors, Sonic Lost World, and God, what was it? Oh, Sonic Boom.
Yeah. Boom, yeah. Fire and Ice. Yeah.
Well, Fire and Ice was good. It was
that was after. Yeah, Sonic Boom, the original one, was terrible. Yeah.
The first one for 3DS and then the first one for Wii U, which I think hit on the same day, were just awful. But Sonic Boom, Fire and Ice was actually kind of fun. Like I think I gave it like a 7.5 when I reviewed it for Game Informer or something like that. So it was like,
by Sonic standards, that's a 10.
And so Nintendo set the release date for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, April 28th, 2017, which would hit just under 2 months after the Switch launched. Which, you look at that 2017 for the Switch. You got Breath of the Wild, day one. You got Mario Kart 8 Deluxe 2 months after. I think a month after that was Splatoon 2. And then later in the year, we got Super Mario Odyssey. Like that was just an incredible first year for the Switch.
Your internet must have cut out when you must have said ARMS, right?
Oh, yeah, ARMS, too.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure that was okay. Right.
Are you an ARMS defender?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
I thought it was fun. I would like to see them take another crack at it. But yeah, like it was the weakest of like this is like our new games that we're putting out for the Switch.
There were ideas there, and I always like when Nintendo does try to do a new IP, and like as we saw with Splatoon, it can really work sometimes. But yeah, I remember when they announced Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, I was kind of disappointed because it was like, oh man, I was ready for I thought it was going to be like a real new Mario Kart, but like time has shown that was an incredible decision because first of all, the amount of stuff they added to it, which was unbelievable by Nintendo standards, and also the Switch, like Mario Kart 8 was already so good, and to have that, as we saw with a lot of Wii U games, a lot of these games were really great. You throw it on the system that's easily taken onto a flight or on the go. Man, it makes all the sense in the world, especially Mario Kart. That is something you can bring over to your friend's place and just sit down, knock out a Grand Prix. They knew what they were doing with that.
Absolutely. And I remember, I mean, we'll get into this a little bit later when we talk about like our ranking of, we're going to do a definitive ranking of the top 5 gimmicks in Mario Kart history. And I remember I had this epiphany when I was on a flight. I think I was going out to E3 that year, and I was on a flight and I was like, okay, I'm going to play Mario Kart. I'm really in the mood to play Mario Kart. So I open up, just out of habit, I get out my 3DS, and I'm like firing up Mario Kart Super Circuit for some reason. And then I played one race and I was like, wait a second. I don't need to like play like crappier versions of the game I wish I was playing just because I'm traveling. And I pulled out my Switch and I'm like playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to video games.
Yeah. I'll occasionally go back and like they're the ones that like nostalgia wise, like the SNES one. I'll occasionally go back for nostalgia. Like my dad's over. It's like, hey, remember we used to play this? But then like there are ones like Super Circuit specifically where it's like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm all right. I'll play these levels. I'll play Cheeseland on Mario Kart 8. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like that's the best part about Mario Kart 8 is you don't have to compromise just to play like older content. You can go and be like, oh, I really love this course from like Super Circuit. I don't know why I keep going to Super Circuit. It's probably the worst one.
It's the worst one. Yeah, definitely.
But like, I don't know, maybe there's a course that I really like from that game and I can play it with the better graphics, better performance, better mechanics.
Yep.
And yeah. So Mario Kart 8 Deluxe also added a second item slot, which I forgot was not in the original Wii U version. And then several tweaks to gameplay, also included all the previous DLC, plus new characters. And then when it came out, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe got even higher scores than Mario Kart 8 from Wii U. It got a 92 on Metacritic, including a 9.25 from Game Informer's Brian Shea. And then came the Booster Pass, or Booster Course Pass, which was announced during a February 2022 Nintendo Direct. And this was spread out across 6 waves of 8 courses for an additional 48 tracks, bringing the game's total to an enormous 96 tracks. Just unheard of.
When they announced that, it was such a weird thing because like Nintendo has always been behind the curve on online stuff and DLC support and things like that. And I remember that, and it seemed so astronomical. And there was such a like timeline and this content roadmap. It was all like really thought out. And it's like, yeah, it's gonna be a mix of like courses from the mobile games and classic courses and brand new ones. And just like, oh my god, that is like really. And you knew they were going to be good. Like Mario Kart never really missed with courses, and I just couldn't believe they were actually doing it and doing it so right. But it made sense because like on a mechanical level, I don't really have complaints about Mario Kart 8. I know there's eventually going to be a 9 and I'm sure it's going to be better, but 8 is damn near perfect. So if you're just going to like give it years more life, I am not going to complain about that.
Yeah. I mean, were you surprised by how good the Mario Kart Tour levels were?
They aren't my favorites. They are good, and they work better in Mario Kart 8 than, I barely touch the phone when I do not like playing games on my phone. But there's something weird to me about just like the real world locations. Like, why? Like, why am I Yoshi in Sydney? Like this is weird. Like Yoshi's never been to Australia. What are you talking about? Like they don't live there. They're not my favorites, but I think it did make sense for them to be included in there.
Yeah, I was glad that we got that. I was also really glad that we got new characters added, which was not announced when they first announced like the Booster Course Pass. Because starting in Wave 4, we slowly start getting more characters. And it started with Birdo. And then over the course of 2023, we got Petey Piranha, Wiggler, Kamek, Diddy Kong, Funky Kong, Pauline, and Peachette. Which one was your favorite to get added to that?
Well, it's got to be Funky Kong. I'm a big Funky Kong guy. He's just a cool dude. But I also really like Wiggler. It's just so stupid to me seeing this giant hunched over caterpillar with like 90 legs and 2 of them holding a tiny wheel. It's just a very funny visual to me.
Yeah, it's I'm always a Diddy Kong guy. Like I don't know. I wish that we would get like a Diddy Kong Racing re-release or something.
I love Diddy Kong Racing. If anything, I would love to see the ideas from Diddy Kong Racing find their way into Mario Kart. I'm surprised there hasn't been more of like a hub world, adventure mode, boss fight type stuff. Like that stuff worked in Diddy Kong Racing.
Multiple different types of vehicles.
Yeah.
Like we got that in Sega All-Stars Racing Transformed, but like I don't know. It's never been fully realized the way it was in Diddy Kong Racing.
Yeah, I think Diddy Kong Racing is very, very underrated. I loved that game.
Absolutely. So the Booster Course Pass, I think it's very much a net positive, but it did get a little bit of criticism since most of the tracks were recycled from past games. We did get some new tracks in there as well. And then they also had lower quality textures. If you looked at some of it, like that was because people blow things out of proportion. That was a big controversy.
Oh, really?
And then a lot of the courses didn't use the anti-gravity mechanic either, so that some of them stuck out a little bit like sore thumbs. But overall, you were pretty satisfied with the Booster Course Pass, right?
Yeah, I mean, just give me more reasons to have this on my Switch and pull it out and play it. Especially like with my dad, because that my dad and I played that first Super Nintendo one all the time,
Same.
and I got him a Switch for Father's Day a few years ago. Got him Mario Kart, and he got obsessed with it. So it's like there's a fun nostalgia to it, and it's definitely like. It's very hard to get him to try a new thing and like it. And the fact that he tried Mario Kart 8 and he knows how to play it, like that is our go-to now if we're around each other. Like he's actually coming up this weekend and I'm sure we're going to do some Grand Prix.
Oh, nice.
So, just give me more of a reason to keep playing that game. It's probably the most played game on my Switch, I would imagine. I mean, like everything else, like I put 150 hours or whatever into both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom probably, but like you beat those and you're kind of done with them for the most part. Mario Kart is a regular. It's like always in that first home screen row. There's always going to be Mario Kart 8,
Yeah, I mean, I had that same experience with my dad playing the SNES one, and I still bring my Switch whenever I visit my folks back in Pennsylvania because I know it's like I know at some point my dad and I are going to fire up Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and play a couple Grand Prix just for old time's sake. Over the course of this show, I have mentioned this so many times, but wouldn't you know it, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, best-selling Switch game of all time. But the difference here is that Mario Kart 8 sold 8.5 million copies on the Wii U to claim that title. And Mario Kart 8 Deluxe sold 62 million copies. So for comparison, on the Switch charts, if Mario Kart 8 Deluxe came out, excuse me, and sold 8.5 million copies, it would place it at number 23 on the Switch list.
Boy, that shows you the value of an install base, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Jeez.
So
it was a great game back then. It's just people didn't have the Wii U.
Yeah, I mean, they've done the right thing, though, right? Re-releasing all these amazing Switch or Wii U games onto Switch.
I mean, virtually, I'd say most of the big ones now are on Switch, outside of obviously like Wind Waker HD, Twilight Princess HD, which I'm playing through Wind Waker HD again right now. And by God, they should put that on the Switch. It is so good still. But yeah, I mean, Pikmin 3, I mean, even didn't Wonderful 101 eventually come to Switch?
The ones that come to mind for me that are still missing, that are good games, the NES Remix games.
Sure.
Yoshi's Woolly World. I really love Yoshi's Woolly World.
That never came to Switch?
No, we got Yoshi's Crafted World, and they were like, I guess that's good enough.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I've been a proponent that I think Star Fox Zero could be made into a somewhat good game if they remove the second screen nonsense and rework some of the levels.
Yes.
But I've had people who have been like, yeah, I used to think that way too. And then I replayed Star Fox Zero, and those problems are a lot deeper than just the second screen. So I'm questioning that. I've not dusted off my Wii U, and I kind of refuse to go back and play that game. But
I remember not loving it when I reviewed it, and I do remember the gamepad focus being a big part of what I didn't like about it. But it did seem like there were bigger problems.
And it sucks because I don't know if we're ever going to get another Star Fox game, because it seems like Shigeru Miyamoto loves Star Fox so much. And it seems like he was gung-ho about Star Fox Zero, and then when it came out and kind of landed with a dud, I think Ben Hansen has actually asked him what is the most underrated Nintendo game, or maybe it was the most underrated Wii U game, and he said Star Fox Zero.
Maybe I should try it at some point. But I'm over having hope. I love the first one, and I love 64 even more. I love 64, and then every single one past that I've been disappointed so many times. I'm beyond the point of getting excited. I mean, who am I kidding though? If they did a Nintendo Direct next week and they're like Star Fox is back, I'm like hell yeah, and then I'd be disappointed again. But yeah.
I mean, I adore Star Fox 64. I've told the story about how the most immersive gaming experience I've ever had was not VR or anything like that. It was being on a flight from Baltimore to Austin, Texas, and the worst turbulence I've ever experienced in my life. And I had my 3DS, and I was playing Star Fox 64 3D, and having the plane just jarring all around, playing Star Fox. It was so much better than a Rumble Pack.
That sounds delightful.
It was awful. But also I was just I feel sweat dripping down my face as I'm doing barrel rolls. And
oh my God. I forgot that 3DS one is really good.
It really is. Yeah, I love that. So my question to you, because, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, 62 million copies, puts it about 17 million copies above number 2, which is Animal Crossing New Horizons. And that's an absolutely massive gap. Why do you think Mario Kart is such a system seller? It's so often the best-selling game on a system.
I think more than any, like obviously Mario, that name is so synonymous with video games and has been forever. So you've got so much going there. But I think it is more accessible. I think Mario Kart, is more accessible to casual gamers, where it's like, you look at like an Odyssey. Odyssey is maybe the best 3D platformer ever. That gets hard, like platformers are kind of my thing. And by the end, you're doing some of those big levels, and like you don't have to do a lot of the super duper hard stuff or like
stuff,
Champions Road type stuff in 3D World, but like if I handed a controller to my sister Katie, who doesn't play a lot of games, she probably would struggle a little bit with like a Mario Odyssey, whereas a Mario Kart, I feel like everyone, if you've ever played video games, you've probably played a Mario Kart. And the concept is simple enough to where it's accelerate. Here's your weapons. You don't really have to know how to power slide. And if you're playing with someone casual, they can do 100cc. There's things where it's like you can do the motion stuff. You can do the kind of bumper bowling, like that little, whatever they call it, the radar thing that keeps you on the track.
Oh, yeah.
There are so many accessibility things that make it, you could be a 6-year-old or a 70-year-old or someone who just doesn't play games. And you could also be someone like us who works in games for a living. And it's incredibly enjoyable immediately all down the line, whereas I just don't think you can do the same with, like, as much as I love the platformers like an Odyssey or a 3D World or something like that.
Yeah, because I did a history of the Mario Kart series as a whole, probably last year at some point, because it was like the 35th anniversary of Mario Kart on SNES. And it's like, as I went down the list, I was like, almost every single Mario Kart game is the top seller of the system it was on. There's like a couple of outliers where it's like, okay, this is like number 3 on the best sellers. I think it's like Mario Kart 64 was like number 3 or something. And it was behind like Mario 64, which obviously, and then like maybe like GoldenEye or something.
Oh, sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's just like one of those like enduring series that like everybody has just played a Mario Kart game and they have a great affection for it. Like if you ever go up to somebody, you're like, hey, like, do you like Mario Kart? Like nobody's going to be like, nah, I hate that game. It's like, no, everybody has great memories of playing Mario Kart. Like,
I remember sitting in the movie theater during the movie, and the part where the race starts and everything, like everybody was like cheering during that part. It's like, yeah, Mario Kart. Like it's about as universally beloved as video game stuff gets.
It really is. So I have a segment called Everybody Votes, and sometimes that replaces definitive ranking, but we're actually going to do an impromptu Everybody Votes. So I asked my my Twitter followers, what is the best Mario Kart game? Just to see like where people put Mario Kart 8. I said Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, just so we have like, because it's the most updated version. But is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe your answer?
Yes.
Okay, very easily for me as well.
Yep.
58.7%, which is lower than I actually expected, said Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Number 2 was Mario Kart Double Dash with 19.6%, which is a respectable answer.
That's my number 2 as well.
Number 3 was Mario Kart 64 with 16.7%. And then I put Mario Kart Wii as the 4th answer, even though I think there's a pretty huge gulf between those top 3 and everything else. But Mario Kart Wii got 5.1% of the vote.
Okay.
I think that's the right order of those 4 games.
I'm definitely with them on the first 2. I think personally, I do hold a it's very much a nostalgia thing for the first one. I think if you play them now, it's definitely like one of the weaker ones gameplay wise, but it is incredibly strong nostalgia for me. I do remember like by the end of like the 3DS ones and everything, like that was those later Mario Karts before 8 were pretty solid. Like the DS one, the 3DS one, it's getting really good. I actually like those. I think more than the Wii one.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm such a console guy over handhelds that like it kind of just even slipped my mind. Like if I have to play a game on a handheld, like there's a much lower percentage chance that I will be trying that game. That's why I love the Switch so much. Because if I want to play it in handheld, I can. But if like, there's a Fire Emblem game that comes out, it's like, okay, well, I don't have to play this on my 3DS. I can throw it up on the big screen and play it.
Yep.
So let's get to this. Where do you think the Mario Kart franchise can even go from here?
I mean, that question is like, what is the gimmick? What is the thing that like, because I guess they could just like keep adding tracks forever, but at a certain point, I mean, the Switch 2 is going to come out. There has to be a different SKU, a different box, a different thing to buy. And it's not Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. At this point, I think you do need to make something called Mario Kart 9 or just something that signifies like this is the sequel to the Mario Kart you've been playing for a decade. Honestly, I don't know how many people would be mad if it just basically all new courses, add some new weapons, add some new characters. I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, I think the occasional fun trick or gimmick during a track is fine, but I don't think you need to have the one big and now every track's doing this, because it's already very busy. There's already a lot going on. Mm-hmm. I'd love to be wrong. I would love for them to show a trailer and they show something halfway through the trailer where I'm like, oh my God, that's going to change everything. I've never thought of that. But I don't know. I kind of just want more. I want new. I want new tracks. If they announced it and it was like, here's 40 new tracks, and here's what it looks like, and here's some modes or whatever. I would be thrilled just to have a new one. But I'll allow myself, to be surprised and excited by something that maybe I'm not even thinking of right now.
I wouldn't mind if they started doing kind of like the platform approach, where it's like everything that you have in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe carries forward. But now there's new gimmicks, new courses that use those gimmicks, new gameplay mechanics. My big thing that I've been saying that if they wanted to do more paid DLC, double dash mode, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe double dash mode. That would be the only thing that I could see them doing that would improve Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's package, aside from okay, we're adding more characters from the mobile game.
Yeah, and then I guess if you're playing online or something, it would just be different lobbies of okay, this is a double dash race, this is a separate thing, because they do the 2 item boxes now, but it's not the same thing where it's I'm going to save this for later, you get in the back, I want the real double dash experience. Yeah,
and you could do co-op and everything like that, like you could on GameCube. Do you think that the next Mario Kart game is pretty early in the Switch 2 life cycle?
I think it'd be great if it was.
I mean, it's been 10 years since we got an all-new Mario Kart.
I mean, if they launched the Switch 2 with a Mario 3D platformer and a Mario Kart, that's pretty damn strong.
I don't know if any Nintendo launch year is going to be as good as 2017 was. We talked about how great that year was, but if they couldn't give us an all new maybe a 2D Zelda, because I know we're not getting a 3D Zelda for a long time unless it's a remaster. And I'm sure that we're going to get a 3D Mario game. I've been saying that Donkey Kong might actually be the star of the Switch 2 launch window.
I would love that.
Donkey Kong Country, maybe a new Donkey Kong 3D platformer, something like that. Because my logic is that the Mario movie came out, right? And they're probably thinking all right, how can we capitalize on this popularity? Mario got an all new 2D platformer. We're getting Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. We got Mario versus Donkey Kong, which, a remake, but still Donkey Kong's in the title. Mario and Donkey Kong were a major conflict of that Mario movie. We got Princess Peach Showtime, the Peach starring in her first game in a long time. I would be surprised if they're not thinking of other ways to leverage the increased popularity of that main cast.
Yeah, and I would love if it was a bit as much as I love the Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze and Returns, those are great games. I would love if it was hey, we've never really got that great Donkey Kong 3D platformer, I would love the idea of if Donkey Kong 64 was awesome, a 3D platformer, that would be great. I don't hate DK64 as much as a lot of people, but I did play some of it recently on Giant Bomb a few years ago, and it's got a lot of problems. So if they just did that idea right, without the backtracking, without all that stuff, I think that could be really, really cool.
Yeah, I would love Donkey Kong to get his due on the 3D platform. I kind of started really souring on the Rare formula of 3D platforming collectathons. I love Banjo-Kazooie 1. Banjo-Tooie kind of went a little far, and then Donkey Kong 64 just took it to the nth degree.
What's interesting is I never played Banjo-Kazooie, and a few years ago when I started streaming, I was what, I'm going to fix this. Rare Replay had come out fairly recently, and I was so I played the Xbox 360 version of it, and I was Banjo-Kazooie 1 was so good, and I do a certain level of collectathon. 100% of that game, I might have gotten all the achievements, I can't remember, but I loved it, and then, like you said, I went on to Tooie, and it was just I pretty quickly saw how much they were doing and backtracking and kind of this. I was this seems like they went too hard with it. And you're right, with DK64, they just lost their damn minds. So,
have you played the ukulele games?
A little bit. I actually like the 2D Donkey Kong Country style one more than I like the 3D one.
Oh yeah, the Impossible Lair rules. That game is so good. It's oh yeah, these people definitely made Donkey Kong Country back in the 90s and decided they just wanted to make another 2D mascot platformer in that same vein. So yeah, highly recommend that one.
Did you know that I sent a DK Jungle Green Nintendo 64 along with a copy of Donkey Kong 64 to a science research station in Antarctica, and it's still there?
No, I did not.
So I did a series called Burgle My Bananas on Giant Bomb, and it was like a game show thing where we're like earning points by. It was just a nonsense game show I made around DK64. Mike Mahardy was on it. And yeah, and we were playing, and the thing was we were going to play until we all could pool enough of these points that we earned to send the game to Antarctica. And I talked to a fan who was a pilot who like somehow like was a middleman for like bringing stuff to Antarctica to a research station. And so we came to an agreement with him and we did it. And I boxed it up. I remember walking to a place in New York City and then being like, please send this Nintendo 64 to Antarctica. Like, just the weirdest thing. And they sent pictures. The scientists like sent pictures of it, like on the sign of the research station. It looks like it's from the thing. It's just nothing but like vast ice behind it and everything. And there's just like, yeah, N64 hooked up inside the station.
Like some of your stories are the strange. Like you did like Mario Party with Andrew WK, which by the way, it's funny because I had that exact same thought my first year at Game Informer. I was like, oh my God, it's perfect because he's all about like partying. And I was like, he's going to be in town and like he's going to be playing a show. I'm going to reach out to him, see if he wants to do a Mario Party, like come by and play Mario Party. And I was like, maybe somebody's done this before. And I looked up, I'm like, oh, literally Game Informer has done this before.
He was in that office. Yeah. I picked him up from his venue. Yeah.
Didn't you do Dance Central with the late, great Odorous Arungus?
From Brought Guar in. Guar did, because yeah, there was a thing like there was controversy about like, oh, will Connect detect certain skin colors? Will Connect detect you if you are, this height or whatever? And so I did, yeah, will Connect recognize you if you are Guar? And I brought Guar in full outfits. They brought in all their gear and everything. They drank all the beer in Game Informer's fridge without asking. On top of the fridge in the dust, they wrote Guar was here. And I think that was there until the moment they got rid of that.
That's hilarious. Yeah. You've really like just like willed your way into like these amazing scenarios. Like sending a Donkey Kong 64 cartridge to Antarctica is like maybe not even in the top 10.
That's one I almost forget about sometimes. It's fun.
So if listening to this episode has anybody wanting to dive back into Mario Kart, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is available on Switch, as is the Booster Course Pass. If you have Nintendo Switch Online Plus Expansion Pack, you can actually download all the DLC at no additional cost. Dan, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we are going to do definitive ranking and get your eShop Gem of the Week. We will be right back. We are back, and it is time for Definitive Ranking, a recurring segment where we take a Nintendo topic and give our own personal top 5 lists. Since this episode is celebrating Mario Kart 8, Dan, I wanted to get your top 5 Mario Kart gimmicks over the course of the franchise's history. So start at 5, count it down to 1. Just give me a quick sentence about each.
All right. I feel like I'm probably forgetting some, but the first ones that came to mind here for my ranked list were number 5 would be the 3D and 3DS, which I was not super hot on the 3DS gimmick in general. Every once in a while, sorry, I said a sentence and now I'm already giving a whole basically it worked pretty well for Mario Kart. The visuals of Mario Kart lended themselves pretty well for 3D, even if I turned it off probably pretty quick. Number 4, online play, which I believe I did first on DS, the DS online play, but I guess technically like weird GameCube adapter, you could have done it there.
I guess, yeah.
I think of it with DS because I don't know anyone who did it on GameCube. Number 3, I like the glider. I like it a lot. Like it was close enough to Diddy Kong Racing to remind me of that game. And I was like, okay, glad to have that in Mario Kart. Number 2, the extra driver in Double Dash. That was one that was such a cool idea. It was part of the damn title of the game and didn't really come back in other games. And number 1, and I think this is under talked about, is also from Double Dash. And that is each character getting their own dedicated weapon. I thought because you could pick different characters, like, okay, Bowser has a higher top speed, lower acceleration, throws his weight around, Toad's quick, whatever. But ultimately, I kind of felt like you could pick anyone and make it work. With the GameCube, with Double Dash, I was specifically like, I would have favorites. It's like, okay, I'm going to have adult Mario in the front because he's got the cool 5 fireball thing you can throw in front or behind. And then I can also switch to Baby if I'm behind. And then the big chain chomp will drag you through the course. Or you can be like Bowser and do the giant shell and just wreck everyone on Baby Park. Like that was the thing I thought was so cool that they all had their own special move. And we never saw that again.
Yeah, I completely forgot that even existed, honestly, because it's been so long since I played Double Dash. God, so Double Dash had 2 of the best gimmicks in the series.
It's a really great game, yeah.
It is. Okay, so I have my top 5 here, and I kind of did it on the fly. I'm not going to lie here. Number 5, I'm going to throw Mario Kart 8 Deluxe a bone here and say anti-gravity. I think that is it's a fun twist on the series, and like having it kind of have you go upside down and around like weird like turns, and I like that it throws the twist on, like if you like run into an obstacle, it actually boosts you. It doesn't slow you down. And same thing for like running into other characters. I think that's really, really cool.
Took a while to figure out that's what was happening. I always avoided those,
Yeah. And it's like the first time you do it, you're like, wait, I spun around and then like got a little boost. Like that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, I'm going to say like the gliding and underwater stuff that was introduced in Mario Kart 7. I thought it added some extra dimensions, and it gives you some cool abilities to like the developers some ability to like have some fun with the level design. So that's my number 4. Number 3, I'm going to go with online play as well. I thought that was, a huge step up from only being able to play with like people next to you. Number 2, Double Dash. Come on, you got to have the 2 characters. I think Double Dash mode would rule in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And then number 1, I think it's one that people take for granted: 4 players. On N64.
Of course, that was huge. Yeah.
That was a big gimmick back then. Like, I mean, that's why Super Smash Brothers, that was one of the reasons that they created Super Smash Brothers. They wanted to create a fighting game with 4 players.
I mean, that was a game changer. I mean, I was in high school, or I would have been junior high when that came out. And that was the first time it's like, oh man, we could play. Like, multi-taps existed before, but no one actually owned those, and only a few games supported them. So having just the 4 ports on the system, and Mario Kart was pretty early on in the 64. Like, I think that was probably the first game I ever sat down with 3 friends at like a sleepover and played. And yep, that's a great answer.
Yeah, I had a friend group that was 4 people, and it was just like, it just so happened that Nintendo 64 had like semi-recently come out. So like we would have sleepovers, and we would literally play until the sun was coming up. GoldenEye, Star Fox, Mario Kart, Mario Party, just the best of times. And life will never be better. It's all downhill from there.
Yeah, go out on a good note.
Well, we got one more note here, Dan. It is the eShop Gem of the Week. It's a chance for you to give a shout out to a game that you think deserves a little bit more shine on the Nintendo Switch eShop. What is your eShop Gem of the Week?
Well, my Gem of the Week actually came out back in February of 2020, and I don't ever really hear anyone talking about it. It is a game called Voxelgram, and if you are like me, you think it's a crime that we have not had more Picross 3D, because Picross is a ton of fun, and there's a billion Picross games on the Switch now. They just released, or they're coming out with that Namco one. Mm-hmm. But 3D and 3D Round 2, I think, are so much fun on the 3DS and DS. Voxelgram is the closest you can come on the Switch to it. Now, I don't think it's perfect. It's not, first-party Nintendo. It's a little rough around the edges. In fact, I had a little bit of trouble like getting used to the controls. It's not quite as elegant as Picross 3D. But my wife Bianca, she played through the whole thing and just swears by it. She's like, you got to go back to it. It is like, you get used to the controls. It's awesome. So like, I've been meaning to go back to it. I just re-downloaded it recently. So if you're just itching to play Picross 3D on your Switch, the closest you're going to get is Voxelgram. It's like $8 on the eShop. And
it does have like a nice, charming, like art style, like very cozy art style. Like I'm looking at one screenshot where it's like you're in a kitchen.
And you were like putting together stuff. It's like, you're making a bunch of items and it's going into a diorama. Yeah.
But then you have like that very traditional Picross, like, all right, here's like blocks with numbers that you have to solve the puzzles around. But so yeah, it definitely looks like it would scratch that Picross itch. And it's only $8 on the eShop. And as you mentioned, it came out on my birthday in 2020.
There you go.
27th, 2020. So yeah, if that sounds like it's up your alley, go check out Voxelgram on the eShop. $8. You can do a lot worse, it sounds like.
Oh yeah.
All right, Dan. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of All Things Nintendo. We've been trying to make this happen for more than a month now.
I know. It worked out, especially when you told me it was going to be Mario Kart 8. It's like, man, I got a lot I could say about that. It makes a lot of sense. It was my last Game Informer review, so I'm glad we were able to make it work.
Actually, wait a sec. It's been longer than a month, because I think I first mentioned it to you when we were at the Queens of the Stone Age show that we went to.
That was like September. Yeah.
So
we've been talking about it, but we made it work.
We have been. So thank you for joining me. I'm glad we could finally work this into the schedule, and I appreciate you sharing your insight about Mario Kart 8.
Absolutely. It was a blast.
And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. If you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com. Hit me up on social media at Brian P. Shea, or leave a comment on the free All Things Nintendo Patreon page. That All Things Nintendo channel on the Game Informer community Discord still exists, so subscribe to our Twitch channel even just for 1 month to get access to that. Dan, tell everyone where they can find you on the internet.
Find me on giantbomb.com. Check out Blight Club. Very fun show, especially if you're an old replay fan. It's more of that, but just bad games. It's great. Also, the Fire Escape Cast. That is a podcast I do every other week with Twitch's Mary Kish and former Game Informer intern Mike Mahardy. It is kind of a video game podcast. It's also a lot of just weird ramblings and things like that, but it's a lot of fun. Always makes me laugh every week. And then Dan Ryckert on Instagram, Twitch. Try to stream when I can. Do some like late night weekend streaming. It's always fun. And I'm not really on Twitter as much anymore, but Dan Ryckert on wherever you can find me.
That is our show for this week. Thank you all again so much for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time.